Welcome to Work Like a Human, a podcast from GoInnovation. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Work Like a Human. I'm Rory Tyre, an executive coach. I'm so glad that you're here because today we are talking about the Swiffer Sweeper. You may be thinking, yes, I appreciate the Swiffer Sweeper's convenience and portability, but what does that have to do with working like a human? Well, actually, a lot. The Swiffer Sweeper was created because of the principles of something called human-centered design or human-centric design. If you're not sure what that is, let me give you a couple of examples of why that kind of thinking matters so much. So imagine that you're over a massive nonprofit and you're tasked with serving a very specific group of people. How do you know that the things you're going to do to serve them actually meet a need that they have in a way that will produce results? Because you could go in and try to serve people and have it just be an utter failure. Let's imagine you're the VP of innovation in a large company and you're tasked with creating a new product to generate new revenue. How do you know what to create? How do you know whether it's going to actually meet a need that exists in the market? And then finally, imagine that you're responsible for creating an onboarding process for new employees inside any kind of organization. How do you know that the new hires will enjoy that process and have their actual questions answered? Because as we all know, people can go through a process like that and come out the other side feeling like, what did I just experience? This is not helpful to the actual questions I have. All of those things can be addressed using the principles of human-centric design. Another layer to this conversation is that both Steadman and Dan are passionate about helping people at the base of the socioeconomic pyramid experience the benefits of human-centric design. So a lot of these conversations take place at the level of very large corporations, very well-funded NGOs. Steadman in particular, when he worked with the Center for Creative Leadership, he scaled human development work to more than 500,000 people in about 5 years because he worked with people like Dan to take complex research-based leadership concepts and turn them into symbols using some principles of human-centered design so that anybody, regardless of where they came from, what language they spoke, how much money they had, could go through a program and walk away with tools they could actually take back to their communities and use for real social change. And we're still using a lot of those principles in various places around the world to help with real-world issues like democratic elections. So human-centered design is the idea of how do we take people and put them actually back at the middle of whatever it is we're creating so that it serves real people in the ways that they really desire to be served. And the interesting thing is, people are not actually always great at talking about what they really want or what they really need. And you're going to discover this as Dan tells a story about how when he was working with Moen, there was a team of people who were trying to design a better shower head. And the stuff that they went through to try and understand what people really want out of a shower is pretty amazing. Bunch of really interesting stories like that. There's a lot of principles you can take away to get better at what you do and to help you and other people work more like a human. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and place you in Steadman and Dan's hands. I'll see you on the other side for a few reflection questions.
So this is Steadman Harrison, and I am with GoInnovation, and I have the treat and the pleasure of talking to a friend today. Dan Buchner, tell me where you are and tell me what's going on in your part of the world.
Well, I'm actually on the southern end of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada, staring across the strait at the snow-covered mountains in Washington State in the United States. These days, I'm just trying to stay sane, man. Just trying to stay sane.
I hear you. Yeah, we were just mentioning the fact that we're probably as far apart as two humans can be to be able to tackle a Zoom call. So I'm here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I'm looking out at the mountains of Ethiopia in the distance. I'm actually outside, which was the best spot I could find for internet, oddly enough. Dan, I'm thinking back to when you and I first met. I traveled up with Lyndon Rago to Boston for a visit to what I think was at the time called Design Continuum. What was Design Continuum? How did you get there? And what was sort of the path into that work?
Yeah, so Design Continuum is one of the leading design and innovation consulting firms in the world. And I found my way to Design Continuum because I'd been one of their biggest clients for quite a few years. And they ultimately asked me to come and join the consulting firm.
You mentioned the fact that you were a client at first, and I believe I remember that was at Moen. For those who don't know what Moen represents in terms of its contribution to design around the world, could you maybe mention a few of the things that you did when you were with them and that Continuum helped in terms of contribution?
Yeah, sure. So Moen is a US-based manufacturer of water faucets, plumbing fixtures, shower heads, those kinds of things. When I was in charge of design at Moen, I partnered with the folks at Design Continuum on quite a few projects, but the one that stands out the most is the project we called the Great Shower Project. And the situation was our corporate owners wanted us to grow our business faster than the rate of the market. And so we had to find new opportunities to create new kinds of products and services to grow our business. And the CEO said to us, okay, Dad, we got to figure out some new to the world products. And so I said, well, maybe we should do something around creating a great shower experience, because we were all business travelers flying all over the world all the time. And I just said, every time I go to a hotel and go to take a shower, the showers just suck. So why don't we figure out what makes a really great shower and then figure out some products to deliver that kind of experience?
Hey, if I recall the story, didn't you have to get permissions to record people taking showers and then see what they did to do things like adjust the temperature and get the volume right and constantly tweak and try to get it comfortable? And then I think I recall the story being that some people preferred like a cold splash or a hot flash after their shower.
And as part of the research for this project, we did a lot of things. We built a little lab and we went out and bought all kinds of things that make different kinds of water streams, like fountain head, things that make fountains in public parks, and agricultural sprinklers. And then we put our bathing suits on and we just like blasted ourselves with all of these water effects to see if, what it was like. So it was like Edison, we'll just try 10,000 things until we find something that works. But at one point we decided that we need to know what actually really goes on in the shower. And because the shower experience is highly experiential, people have trouble describing in words. So we said, we're just going to have to videotape people in their showers to see what actually goes on. So we got, I think it was 9 people to agree to allow us to put video cameras in their showers, and we videotaped them taking their showers in their morning routine. And we learned lots of really interesting things. And you're quite correct. There was one gentleman there who, at the end of the shower, turned the hot water up so high. We were measuring the temperatures of the water when he was doing it. And it probably would have scalded most people. But for some reason, he just had to get that jolt. But we learned lots of really interesting things that people couldn't have told us. One of them was that while you're in the shower, for most people, your eyes are closed more than 50% of the time. And so what does that mean if you're going to design products that you want people to manipulate or control if half the time their eyes are closed, right? We learned lots of other interesting things that I probably shouldn't share on a podcast like this. But
I am thinking of other great stories, and you have a lot. But there's a product that a lot of people are familiar with, the Swiffer Mop. You and a team of folks had to do some unique research in the human-centric design world in order to discover what it was that people really wanted to use in terms of quick cleaning their rooms. Can you describe, I think it was you had to find a bunch of OCD friends, and then you actually did something to make their house a little less than clean.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear. I did not work on that project. That project was Noel Dye and Jack Gunlack were the Design Continuum folks on that project, and they were working with a team from Procter & Gamble. In the human-centered design world, what we do is we look for extreme users. So in this case, when we're looking at floor cleaning, extreme user would be somebody who cleans their floors all the time or who never cleans their floors. And so we went out and found extreme users, and we went into their homes and talked to them and saw how they cleaned or didn't clean their floors. The team went into the home of an elderly woman who lived in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. She lived alone, had a 2-story house, no pets. She was the only one who lived there, and she vacuumed her house twice a day. And she was telling the team she loves her vacuum cleaner. And the only thing she uses to clean her house is her vacuum cleaner. She vacuums her house twice a day. She never puts her vacuum away. It sits in her kitchen. She had a beautiful home. One of my colleagues reached over and dropped some coffee grounds onto the floor. And the woman, as she's telling us how much she loves her vacuum cleaner, looks over and sees the grounds on the kitchen floor. And literally, as she's saying, the only thing I ever use to clean my floors is my vacuum cleaner, she goes over to the kitchen cupboard, pulls out a little broom and a dustpan, and sweeps up the coffee grounds as she's talking about her vacuum cleaner. That's, I think, a great example of what people think they do and what they say they do can sometimes be different than what they actually do. And what we learned from her was that the cleanliness of her house, it had nothing to do with germs or dirt or any of that. It was, for her, the cleanliness of a house was a reflection on her as a person, and she was concerned that somebody would drop in unexpectedly. So she wanted her house to be perfectly clean all the time. And that was one of the insights that led the team to think about, well, how do we help people clean their floors almost instantaneously without having to get their vacuum out or having to get a mop and put detergent in a pail? How can you make spot cleaning of the floor immediate?
We describe that process as human-centric design. We talk a lot about design thinking. For someone who doesn't really know what those words mean, can you make it simple for us?
Yeah, for me, human-centered design and design thinking are the same thing. So design thinking is essentially human-centered. The idea is, instead of starting with a technology that you have, or with the retail store that you have, or with a factory that you can make things with, and creating something and trying to sell it or get people to use it, what you do is you go and you really understand what's important to people. You start with the people. It's human-centric. And in this case, Procter & Gamble had asked us to come up with an innovative way to clean a hard surface floor. And so one of the first things we did is we went out and went to people's homes, talked to people who clean their floor or don't clean their floor. Why do they do that? And how do they do that? And why it's important to them. So human-centered design is used to create innovative products and services, but it starts by understanding the people that you're trying to serve or adopt your product or service.
I remember one other sort of large brand, and it had to do with making a new toaster. And without giving away the punchline, I'm wondering if you can tap into that and give us the lesson that came out of that pursuit of making a new toaster.
You know what? I don't remember that one.
Okay, so this was the whole idea of why do people toast bread? And the question I thought was just a really powerful one, not what kind of knobs, what sort of bells and whistles do you want on your toaster, but what was it that actually you were tapping into? And it had a lot to do with the sense of home that people experience when they actually go through the process of just toasting bread and smelling the aroma and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, well, you said it, right? It's way more than the appliance, right? It's the fact that you want warm, delicious bread and the smell of it. That's what's important. And the toaster is just a tool to help you get what you ultimately aspire to. And, any good restaurant knows this, right? Cinnabon, think about Cinnabon, right? What do? They blow that smell of cinnamon down the corridors of airports, so that entices you to come in and buy their product. So yeah, it's more about the experience that people are aspiring to than it is the actual service or product that delivers that.
Thanks so much for listening to Work Like a Human. We will return to Dan and Steadman's conversation after a quick break. A lot of us are using Zoom for a lot of reasons right now. To connect with friends and family, for our work, and a lot of people I've talked to, we're sort of like dragged into it kicking and screaming. Zoom fatigue, the Google searches for that just shot up. So what's the problem? Well, Zoom can be frustrating to use if you haven't taken the time to learn it. I can't figure out how to get people to talk to each other. They talk over each other. I have created a course called Using Zoom Effectively that will teach you everything you need to know about how to get the most out of Zoom. Take what you used to do in person and put it on Zoom, because the truth is, Zoom allows you to work with anyone, anywhere, from anywhere. If you ask me, that's a pretty incredible opportunity. So Do yourself a favor. You haven't launched the course yet, but the waiting list is open, and I want to offer you, because you're watching this, a chance to get access to a price that we will offer at no other time because it's too low. Videos and some PDFs, and become part of a cohort where you have Q&A with me. You'll experience Zoom meetings that I facilitate, and we'll walk through exactly how this works. Join the waiting list today and get access to exclusive pricing once we launch. That pricing will not be available ever again. Be equipped with everything you could possibly need to know to use Zoom effectively. Today, this is for anybody that works with other people in any capacity over Zoom on a regular basis. You will benefit from this course. UsingZoomEffectively.com.
Our paths converged not around Moen or Procter & Gamble or Black & Decker, but around a couple of different themes. The Center for Creative Leadership was a nonprofit. When Lyndon and I came to visit you, we were pursuing another design thinking venture. I remember actually coming into your conference room and being surprised. It was the first time I'd ever met anybody that worked at Gates Foundation. I think it may have been the water team that was there. What brought you into the context of nonprofits, foundations, and what was different, or maybe what was the same?
Yeah, so in 1999, I was asked by an international organization of designers to head up a team of designers who flew in from all over the world to South Africa to go and go into the slums around Pretoria and Johannesburg and study the issues around sanitation and see if there was anything that we could come up with that might be able to help that situation. And so I flew to South Africa. And at that point in my career, I traveled internationally quite extensively, but I'd never been in the slums. I'd never been in that kind of environment. And I remember the first day I got there, I walked in there, I'm going like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I'm just a designer. And I had a team of 6 people. We worked for a few weeks. And the more we learned, the more time we spent with those people, we said we can't leave here without trying to do something. This isn't about imagining the utopian future. This is about coming up with some solutions that these people could make for themselves. Didn't require outside funding, didn't require the government. And so we came up with some really interesting ideas of simple devices that they could make themselves with the materials they had around them to help deal with some of the issues around sanitation in the slums. And it was at that point that I realized that this human-centered design or design thinking, which I'd only ever employed for for-profit corporations, was in fact a very powerful mindset and approach to dealing with really complex social issues like sanitation in the slums. Yeah. And that experience changed my life. And from that moment on, I said, I have to figure out how to move my career and have an impact in those kinds of situations. And so over time, I worked my way increasingly into this social innovation, if you want to call it, space.
And that's where we connected. Leadership Beyond Boundaries is now what we call it, but there was a movement born out of that. At the time, I think you helped us with some other branding, Global Voice of Leadership. You took a team to India. Yeah, I took a team to Eastern Africa. And yeah, we learned a lot through that process. What connected you deeply with CCL? I mean, brought you far enough to want to even get into the organization and be a part of it?
Oh, the connection with CCL came through AMI, Association of Managers of Innovation. I gave a talk at AMI one time. People at that campus would ask me, well, if you're coming for the AMI meeting, would you come a day early and give a talk to our people or do a workshop for, some of our staff at CCL? So got to know CCL. And at that time, you were quite interested in working in that space and helping CCL shift to that. And Dave Altman, asked me if I would help bring some design thinking, human-centered design methods into the work processes at CCL. And so that's how we ended up setting up a couple of teams. And you went to Eastern Africa, and I went with Lyndon and Philo to rural India.
we came across this idea that much of what we could present on flip charts and in workbooks, very simple, now what we call essentials, was exactly what people wanted. I think you and the team asked a group in the Mumbai area, so what can you afford? And it was something like 40 rupees a day, $1 a day for that classroom experience. I think including things like tea and the workbook itself.
Yeah.
And so that became a very big design challenge for us. How do you take a expensive product, $5,000, $10,000 product, and bring it down to $1 a day? I don't know if you know, but we actually, with Samaritan's Purse in Karamoja, Uganda, delivered a mother leader health program to 20,000 women for $20,000. It took us about another 7 or 8 years, but we actually got there, which is really cool.
Yeah, it was so satisfying to see the work that you did and the results that it got and continues to get, Steadman.
Well, I think we learned things at both ends of that spectrum. One of the things that you and your team, I believe, brought to the Center for Creative Leadership was the idea of watching emotions. So you may have even mapped it from before a participant came to a 5-day program through the 5 days, including things like their first experience with a one-on-one coach. What was that all about in terms of mapping emotions?
Yeah, so we were asked by some people at the Center for Creative Leadership to help them figure out how to understand and make the experience of a leadership development participant that goes through a CCL program. And so the way to do that is to understand the current experience, and then see where there's highs and where there's lows, and decide whether you want to amplify the highs and should you deal with the lows and how can you deal with the lows. And so you can go through the actual workflow that people have to go through. Like they have to become aware, they have to sign up, they have to make payment, they have to book their travel, they have to show up at the campus, they have to get somebody to cover for them while they're away. So you can go through sort of the functional steps. But we also wanted to map the emotional steps, because the kinds of leadership development experiences can be quite emotional. And that's what makes them so impactful for people. So understanding their emotions as they go through that functional journey is really, really important. And the way we did it is we ask 5 or 6 participants to videotape themselves first thing in the morning before they went into the classroom, of the 5-day program. And then at the end of the day, just before they went to bed, for a minute and a half, and just tell us what you're feeling. And so it was fascinating, because on the morning of the first day, people are going like, I have no idea what's going to happen to me. Like, I'm really scared. And who are those people going to be? And then at the end of the first night, they're going like, oh my God, I don't know if I should have come. Like, they just broke me to pieces. I'm like, so I don't know. I don't even know what state I'm in. Right. And so that was a really powerful tool, because what we did was we went back and we created an interactive site that was shared across all the functions at CCL about what the journey looks like. And so here's the functional steps, and here's the issue they had with invoicing or payment or whatever. And then we put in these little video clips of people as they're actually going through the program, which was, and then, the end of the 5th day, it's like, oh my God, like I gotta make major changes in my life. I gotta do things differently. And what the hell am I doing in this job anyways? And yeah, it was really impactful. And it really helped the people in the organization realize what the thing that they did, in their function at CCL, and the fact and the impact it might have on the participant, no matter how small.
Huge impact in terms of the outputs of that. And it really did help, I think, us understand the power of the emotions of getting 360-degree feedback,
Oh, yeah.
Mentioned that undoing and that low point,
Mm-hmm.
and then the incredible comfort of having a one-on-one coach involved in that process. So many things that came out of that.
Yeah,
I am thinking
one thing that really surprised me was the very beginning. So when your boss comes to you and says, "I'm going to send you, I want you to go through this leadership development program," most people go, "Well, that's great. I must be like on my way up in this organization." And then they get back to their desk and go, "Is this because like I got something? Like, is this remedial? Like, do I have something wrong with me?" Right? And so my assumption was that everybody would be really excited about the opportunity to take a program like this, and in fact, lots of people weren't. They were really uncertain, and we wouldn't have known if we hadn't had them keeping diaries and taking videos of themselves reacting.
I'm remembering my own emotions going to my first association of managers of innovation. So Stan Grishewitz kindly allowed me to come and join a unique group of people. What is it that you think these innovators have in common? What's a unique trait or something that they have as a characteristic in common?
First thing I would say is just curiosity. Curiosity in trying to understand what's really going on underneath the surface. Curiosity to explore and try new things. I think they're kind of cavalier, in the sense, like I remember when I was at Moen, the organization was saying, we need to be more innovative. We need to have more innovative products. And then when I try and do things that would help us create those, I'd get a lot of resistance in the organization. And so I used to say to myself, you know what? If they don't like what I'm doing, they can fire me. They have this stated goal of being innovative, but when you try and actually do something that moves you in that direction, you hit a lot of resistance. And so I don't know if it was ignorance or stupidity, but I just said to myself, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways, and they can just fire me if they have to. I'll find another job, right? So there's an element of cavalier, being cavalier or risk taker, curiosity and risk taker, probably.
Yeah. I had a president of an organization call me earlier this week to ask some advice about hiring a vice president of innovation. And a lesson that you taught me early on, I said, you can hire a VP of innovation, but if you don't change the culture and have a place for that innovator to be able to do that work, it's just going to be organ rejection. So what is it about that culture change that you have to embrace?
Yeah, actually, I'm right in the midst of writing a book about that.
Well, I didn't even know. I mean, serious.
Yeah. So here's a couple of ways to think about that. Almost all organizations are ecosystems, right? Their work processes, their organizational culture, their hiring practices, their decision-making conventions. And that ecosystem is tuned to produce reliable, predictable results with minimum risk, right? And so the ecosystem is set up. An organization is set up to avoid risk and to produce predictability, which is great because we all want drugs that work and we don't want planes that fall out of the sky. And, shareholders want to see a return on their investment on a consistent basis and all those kinds of things, right? So it's good. But innovation is inherently unpredictable and inherently risky, right? So when you say we're going to bring in a VP of innovation or we're going to set up an innovation lab, you have to realize that person or those people are going to have to find a way to do things that are unpredictable and risky inside of an ecosystem that's intolerant of that.
Yeah.
Right. And as leaders of an organization, if you want innovation to happen, you cannot lead or manage those people in the same way you lead and manage the rest of the organization. And that's the struggle that leaders have, is adding some tools to their toolbox that allows them to keep running the ecosystem, produce consistent results, and at the same time allows some of the organization to operate under a different set of rules, basically.
I remember one of the first slides that I ever saw that you had created that contrasted design thinking and business thinking, and the tolerance for failure. The difference in terms of what people want as an output. And that contrast really it's a strong and powerful difference.
Yeah. And so, in using business thinking, or the kind of thinking that's normally used inside of organizations to produce reliable, predictable, low risk results, relies heavily on precedents. Can you give me 3 examples of where this has worked before? Can you give me the ROI that I'm going to get by having you go and try and come up with something totally new that nobody's ever done before? Like, how do I even know what to do an ROI calculation, right? Where in design thinking or human-centered design or innovation in general, we don't know. We're not able to predict. We have to be okay with ambiguity. We set aside the precedences because they can be limiting sometimes. We rely more on intuition than we do on deductive and inductive reasoning. So it's a whole different world. That
willingness to embrace failure. A friend who was on one of our podcasts recently said, failure is just data. Have you ever had a failure looking back that you would say, this one, I learned so much from it, and it was a magnificent, worthwhile venture to get to that outcome?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I actually don't like using the word failure because it's so loaded. It's such a charged word, especially inside of organizations, big organizations. What I like to talk about is experimentation. And that's really what we do, is we say, this is interesting. Let's go run a little experiment. Let's try it and see what happens. And everybody knows that most experiments don't succeed, right? But you learn something from the experiment and you go, okay, well, let's change your idea slightly and let's run a different experiment and see if that might work, right? So failure is a means of learning, which is, for me, experimentation. And of course we had failures. We had tons of failures in the shower, the shower research, for instance. But that was the point. We wouldn't have learned anything if we hadn't tried, right? If we hadn't tried and failed, if we hadn't run those experiments. So yeah, I'm not a fan of fail fast, fail often, and we just have to let people fail around here. If you're a leader of an organization, you're going like, we can't have everybody failing around here. We'll go out of business, right? And so I like to talk it up in terms of experimentation.
Yeah, awesome. I'm interested. So you mentioned that you're working on this book. Do you have a near-term horizon? And what kind of legacy details are you starting to wrap into that? I mean, is this a punctuation mark or a comma? Where would you say this book's going? Oh,
it's just the beginning, man. I may have a gray beard, but I'm not giving up yet. The book I'm writing is a book aimed at design thinkers who work inside of organizations and are struggling to get people and their organization to adopt these practices. So it's a guidebook it's a guerrilla warfare inside of an organization, tactics for guerrilla war by design thinkers inside of organizations who are resisting their efforts. So it's a very practical guide based on a lot of successes and failures that I've had over the years.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed visiting your home is that design permeates like the corners of life. It's not just something relegated to cranking out a new product. I came and visited you in the middle of a very cold winter and walked in, and you invited us to take our shoes off. And you could feel the heat coming up from your floorboards because you had put the hot water pipes underneath your wood. I'm curious, what is it that you have done recently to bring design thinking into your home space?
Encouraged my wife to start painting. So all of these paintings that are on the wall here are hers.
Excellent.
So,
beautiful.
Yeah. So we moved into this condo, 4 years ago, and basically painted all of the walls white, so that the artwork that she makes is what's highlighted in the space. It's not about the architecture of the house. It's not about the color of the walls. It's about the art that she produces, that she makes.
Yeah.
So that was one conscious choice in this space.
That stood out for me as well on that one visit. How simplicity, clean and decluttered a space can be. And it was a huge impact on me as well, Dan. Thank you for just living it out in day-to-day life. Serious, man.
Okay.
Yeah. So my hope is that the work of Leadership Beyond Boundaries sort of continues to take root. I'm working with GoInnovation. Tell us more about the organization that you're running right now. What's the name of that? And people wanted to find you. How do they find you?
Yeah. So my little organization is called Practical Innovation, Leadership, and Learning. And you can find me at danbuchner.com. Simple as that. And the work that I've been doing lately is a mashup of design thinking and leadership development around complex social issues. So a colleague of mine and I just finished a project down in El Salvador, funded by USAID, working to increase economic activity in El Salvador to decrease outmigration to the United States, which was fascinating. And I helped design and deliver a fellows program funded by an environmental foundation out of California to deal with the decline of the salmon in Alaska, which meant bringing together up-and-coming leaders from all the stakeholders around salmon, including native subsistence fisher people, sports fishing, commercial fishing, fish and game, environmental groups, mining, forestry, you name it, getting them together, helping them figure out how to have constructive conversations with each other, and then using some design thinking techniques to collectively come up with some new approaches that they can try together to try and deal with the decline of salmon. So it's the kind of work that I'm doing now.
Yeah. Our world has changed since you and I saw each other last. It was great to reconnect on Leadership Legacy Circle. We did that via Zoom rather than a face-to-face meeting, which I would have preferred.
Right.
Pandemic is not something that goes away quickly, and it definitely has an impact that's lasting and changing. Are you seeing anything that you would say, oh, this catches my attention from human-centric design lens, whatever you might say in terms of your eye on the world?
Yeah, I would, and a lot of this has been published, but I think it's going to take a long time for people to be comfortable, in settings what they used to be comfortable in, and I think that going to have a huge impact on work, real estate. Like I think commercial office space is not going to be as attractive as it once was. The design of restaurants, and just look what the airlines are struggling with. Like, how do you take a sealed tube of densely packed people and make them safe, right? So there's huge design problems to be overcome. And I think this has shifted. I think this has shifted people, and not going to go back. Not going to go back to the way it was. So lots of, I've talking to a lot of people, and there's a lot of people out there quite excited to be working on trying to solve some of these problems. Like, a lot of my design friends are very excited about, oh my God, this is a huge challenge and a huge opportunity to do some really interesting new things. So even though the pandemic certainly is not something any of us had wanted, it's going to present some really interesting opportunities.
Absolutely. In parting, I'm just curious if there's some golden nugget of wisdom on the design thinking front that you'd say, hey, if you're going to remember one thing from a podcast, from stories, from Swiffer mops and showers, what is it that you want people to hold on to?
It's all about people. In the end, it's all about people. Yeah. That's where to start.
So Dan, I want to compliment you on making it about people. I have had the chance to slow down with you on a few occasions. I'm thinking about, actually, before you moved to Banff, I think we were at an AMI conference there in Banff, and had some wonderful meals, slowed down, listened to music, laughed a lot. Colorado Springs, another one of those in Manitou Springs, some wonderful meals, unpacking life. But making it about people, man, that's the thing that I think has kept me chasing after you, interested to know where you are and what you're up to. Thank you for sharing stories about not only your life, but like the history of your family. I learned a lot, honestly, listening to you talk about your heritage and your father, and man, some amazing parts of your history. You want to mention any of that? Like, was your dad a logger? Do I remember this correctly?
No. He was.
What was it about?
I was a uranium prospector in northern Canada once. Yeah, I worked as a uranium prospector. I had a beer down to my navel and hair out of my ass, and
I think I've seen pictures.
Wild. Yeah, I carry that picture around with me just to shock people.
I think it was probably on a PowerPoint somewhere that I saw it.
You
did,
probably.
By the way, PowerPoints, simplicity, fewer words. When I first met you, I had never seen a really good PowerPoint before.
Yeah, my philosophy is a good image is worth 5 pages of dense text. So you just have to find the right one.
Well, thank you for making time. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for keeping people first. And I look forward to reconnecting, hopefully later this month.
I do too. And thank you for all the good work you and GoInnovations are doing, Steadman.
Wow, that was a fascinating conversation. I really hope you enjoyed it. A couple of things to think about. In the work that you do, are there assumptions you make about how useful or relevant it is that you maybe should revisit in light of this idea of human-centered design? In other words, how do you know that the people you're serving or leading or helping are actually at the center of whatever it is you're trying to do? How can you create experiences that are genuinely more relevant for the people around you? And then finally, we're all part of some kind of systems of power. We all have influence in some capacity. How can you use that power and that influence to create some kind of a system that's more equitable and that puts people more at the center so that it serves people rather than takes away from our humanity? I think at the end of the day, that is what it might look like to work like a human. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time on Work Like a Human.